What's in this video? Only what you bring with you.
How you get so big that you hold up this kind?
Alright, so some time ago I started a Balance of the Force series, and then I was hit with a severe bout of writer's block, and I haven't been able to touch it for like actual months, I'm pretty sure, and I feel super bad about it. So my plan is to knock out the last couple of videos in that series now. So if you haven't caught that series, click on the thing and it'll take you back to the beginning of it. However, my goal is to not make you need to see those in order to get what I'm talking about, but if you are interested in what I'm about to talk about, cool. Click. That's probably going to be more of what you like, hopefully. So what I want to talk to you about today is Force visions and the nature of Force visions. There's a couple of things about them that I find particularly interesting. So the key films where we see a lot of these are in Empire, Force Awakens, and Last Jedi, and they're referenced to a lot in Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones, but we don't see them as much. So I guess what I'm saying is they're in a lot of the Star Wars movies. So the first time we see a vision as Star Wars fans, and I don't mean chronologically, I mean in terms of release order, was in The Empire Strikes Back. Luke is training on Dagobah. Yoda is trying anything he can think of to get something through Luke's thick skull, and they happen upon this dark side cave. Yoda understands that Luke has a test before him, and he tries to warn him with the, don't take your weapons thing, but Luke goes in and has this vision. A couple of things I find interesting here. One, this is a dark side cave, and yet Yoda is not worried about it tempting Luke. Yoda is obviously very worried about Luke falling to the dark side. He goes on about it over and over again, and yet Yoda is not afraid to send Luke into this cave. He knows it's something important. If you've watched my other videos, I go into this in detail, but for short purposes, I don't believe the dark side is inherently evil. And before you start clicking away thinking this chick doesn't know nothing about no Star Wars, a lot of people are evil that use the dark side. And I think the dark side does tempt you to give into your passions, but that's a little bit different than saying the dark side is evil. In the same way, I don't think the light side is inherently good. The way the dark side and the light side are described to us repeatedly in Star Wars films is that the dark side is selfish in its nature, and the light side is selfless in its nature. Now, of course, there's going to be more negative applications for a selfish thing than positive, and there's going to be more positive applications for a selfless thing than negative, but that doesn't mean there are no positive things for selfishness and no negative things for selflessness. I don't think Yoda is necessarily afraid of the dark side, and I don't think he's necessarily afraid of Luke facing this dark side cave, because if he was, A, he wouldn't be hiding on a planet with a dark side cave if he thought the dark side was going to come and kill him in his sleep one day, and B, he wouldn't send Luke in there by himself when he'd had, like, the training equivalent to an online course. Like, he's been studying to be a Jedi such a short amount of time. I think it's interesting, as I said, that Yoda's sending Luke into a dark side cave. I also think it's interesting that Luke is seeing this vision from the dark side of the Force and not the light. Now, I think a lot of people are quick to say that because it was a dark side vision. It was tempting, and Luke saw the evil dark side he could become, so then it must come from the dark side if Luke is going to come from the dark side, and it didn't end up happening. What if visions come more from the dark side than they do from the light? Now, I did not just say that visions only come from the dark side, I said they are more likely to come from the dark side. This is an important distinction that I will get into in a little bit. But if we think of the dark side as a selfish thing and not an evil thing, knowing the future is a selfish thing. It helps me to know my future. It doesn't help Larry if I know my future. There's the argument of if I know that I could turn to the dark side and I stop myself, that probably makes Larry's life a little bit better because I'm not going to go all Kylo Ren on him when he, like, cuts me off in traffic, but it doesn't really help him if I know the future. In the same way, if Larry knows the future for himself, it doesn't help me. So knowing the future is a more selfish thing, and therefore is probably more likely to come from the dark side. Now, there are selfless things to learn from the future, but I think Luke getting a vision from the dark side of the Force isn't just about the vision is Luke's dark side. I think that might be a functional purpose of the dark side of the Force. To that point, let's look at the other big cave scene in Star Wars right now. Rey from The Last Jedi. Rey goes to the part of Octo, which is the giant dark side toilet, and she falls down, and boom, Force vision on the dark side of the Force. And this, of course, happens the first time she reaches out to the Force. The dark side wants to show her something. Once again, we have a young learning Force user going to the dark side of the Force, trying to find out an answer. Now this time, she's not trying to find out about her future, she's trying to find out about her past. She's trying to figure out who she is and where she comes from. Again, this is a selfish thing. Now, I'm not saying Rey is selfish in a bad sense, because she wants to know who her family is. I don't think any person is a bad or evil person if they want to know their family or want to know where they came from. But knowing where you come from is a thing that helps you. Knowing who my parents are is a thing that helps me. Larry is unaffected by me knowing who my parents are. Larry would also be unaffected by Rey knowing who her parents are. So it doesn't make Rey bad, but it does mean she is looking for something that is for herself in that answer. Now, of course, Luke is freaking out because Kylo fell to the dark side, and so the dark side must be all of this bad business, and he doesn't want her to go to the dark side toilet. And I get that. But again, I think it's kind of important to note that a Jedi temple, that arguably is one of the first places there was ever a Jedi, is built on a place where there's a dark side cave. And even Luke says that that is a part of balance. There's a powerful light and a powerful darkness. So that's two really big Force visions in Star Wars. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of exceptions that we see in Star Wars. So we just talked about one of Rey's visions. Let's go on and talk about something from The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens obviously has that big cryptic vision where Rey picks up Luke/Anakin's lightsaber and sees this vision of all of this stuff that is happening in the past and in the future, and all of this stuff is going on. Rey did not want to have this vision. It was not information she was seeking out. It was something the Force wanted her to see. Where and what side of the Force this came from is a little bit harder to pin down. No one was really helped by Rey having this vision, but no one was really hurt by Rey having this vision. Larry was unaffected by having it, and Rey was mostly unaffected other than just getting freaked out. I mean, at no point has she gone back to that vision and gone, ah, Bach. It's a reference that like 3 of you will get. It's fine. So then, was her vision more dark or light? She was probably getting vibes from both sides of the Force in that way. She was seeing visions of the past because that helps her when she talks to Luke and ultimately Kylo later. And I think it's a part of the Force awakening in her so that she can kind of go on to do her destiny. In that way, I think it's ultimately more of a light side vision, but to some extent, there was probably a little bit of the dark side working in there too. Less because I think the dark side had an agenda with that vision, and more just because I think there is balance within the vision. I don't think the Force was being inherently light side or inherently dark side in it. The way I personally see the Force is, I think balance within the Force is not absence of dark or light, and it's just like dispassionate Force doing dispassionate things. I think it's the dark side and light side working together. So I think the dark side and light side were both there because one wasn't more dominant than the other. I think that's interesting though, because this is a vision that Rey didn't seek to have. So I think that's really the difference. I think if you are going to a place to seek answers, then inherently your vision is probably going to draw more from the dark. If the vision is kind of coming on you, I think it's going to come from the Force as a whole. Now, also in canon, from Star Wars The Clone Wars and the Lost Missions arc, the one that only really aired, for lack of a better word, on Netflix, the final arc has a series of Yoda's episodes, and Yoda is trying to figure out a problem, basically, and he and the Jedi Masters meditate in the Force to try to see what's going on. Obviously they're Jedi, obviously they're calling on the light because that's what Jedi do. Also, interesting enough, they get no answers from doing this. I mean, literally, the entire Jedi Council stands for days and thinks and meditates, and they get nothing. So is that because Palpatine's basically in charge at that point and he's blocking their abilities? Or is that because maybe you can't use the light side to seek out answers like that, and that's a thing the Jedi would want to do? Especially Yoda, because this is early on in that Yoda arc, and by the end of the Yoda arc, I think we have the Yoda we see more in The Empire Strikes Back. That is insane amounts of speculation on my part, but it's something I kind of think about. So the only other visions I can really think of in Star Wars are Anakin's nightmares and the visions that Rey and Kylo have of each other in Last Jedi. I'm kind of putting these at the end because I think these are highly, highly manipulated. I think Anakin's nightmares are largely from Palpatine. I mean, at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine knows what happened with Anakin's mother. I think that Palpatine is like inducing these nightmares to make Anakin freak out. I don't think it's necessarily the Force entirely doing this. I mean, the things Anakin's getting warned about are true, so maybe there are things the Force would tell Anakin about anyway, but I do think they're manipulated by Palpatine. Similarly, the visions that Kylo and Rey have of each other are more manipulated because everything that's going on is through this Force Skype thing, and I'm not fully convinced that we know where that came from. For more on that, I have a video on Kylo and Rey and their kind of throne room visions. I also have some thoughts on where Force Skype came from. I guess basically what I'm kind of arguing is that, in general, seeking out knowledge in the Force in terms of like visions of the future or visions of the past is more of a dark side thing, though not necessarily an evil thing. I've thrown this in my Balance of the Force series because it requires understanding that I don't think the dark side is evil, and if you want more explanation on it, it just makes it easier to find what I'm talking about. So, like I said, I'm gonna have probably one more video kind of summing up everything about this Balance of the Force series, and then I'm gonna have one more video that wraps up my Kylo and Rey series, which, hey, is another thing you can click on if you're interested in. And after that, I'm gonna get started on some other stuff. I'm just kind of doing some spring cleaning and finishing some series that I didn't get to, and I'm really sorry I kind of let this one slide, because it was one that I was really excited to do. As always, please follow us at Port Haven Forums on Twitter, visit port-haven.com for even more, and until next time, keep it real, and fly casual.
Cooking can be fun.